A heated confrontation between FCT Minister Nyesom Wike and a naval officer is sparking a major national debate about civilian authority and military discipline. The incident occurred when Lieutenant A.M. Yerima and his men denied Minister Wike access to a disputed plot of land in Abuja. A viral video shows a tense exchange with the junior officer standing his ground. The incident has divided opinions. Some military veterans have condemned the minister's approach as a public humiliation, while others have praised the lieutenant's composure. The Minister of Defense has announced an investigation, assuring that personnel performing lawful duties will be protected. Meanwhile, the Federal Capital Territory Police has dismissed reports that Lieutenant Yerima was allegedly trailed by assassins on Sunday. The police say the claim is false. Now, former Director General of the Labour Party Presidential Campaign Council and a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, Osuntokun, joins us now for a conversation on civilian-military relations in a democratic setting and how to improve on ties between the two parties. Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Good afternoon.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you'd like to comment on the video, but alongside your comments, I'm just wondering what structured dialogue platforms, can be established to improve communication between civilian authorities and the military.
No, I think you're getting it wrong. It's not a question of two institutions relating together. It's a situation of the violation of law of the Nigerian Constitution. Nigerians have been celebrating style over substance since this incident came, focusing between Wike, the minister, and the naval guys there. The naval people there are clearly in violation of the Nigerian Constitution. Their role as constitutional role, has nothing whatsoever to what they were doing. Right? The role of the military in the Constitution is the preservation of the territorial integrity of Nigeria, the territory against external aggression and internal violation. That is simplicity. Look, well, you mentioned civil military relations. I've seen a lot of romanticization of essentially rogue military behavior, and it is very dangerous because it brings about this thing about military messianism. You don't bother about the law that I can see that implication there, that Nigerians are prepared to look the other way, so if somebody portrays himself as a messiah, regardless of what the law says. It's military rule syndrome. And, I personally, it's something that I have a vested interest. While we were growing up, I mean, of course, before 1999, we have had the government of military dictatorship more than civilian rule. So this has affected the psyche and the behavior, our perception of the proper role of the military. They are not even supposed to be interfacing with the civilians on a daily basis. You go to any country, you don't see the army, the navy going around. But here in Nigeria, they carry bags for their officers' wives. They do all sorts of things. How can you explain? How do you explain a man, whether he is retired or not, asking somebody, you are using a public institution to do your own private business. That is, at the end of the day, that is what you are doing. Now, the military, the only person who is vested with the authority over the military is the president. All right? And that is because the role of the military is war. It's only the president who can declare a war or a perception of the potential war situation. Now, the president cannot even do what these people have done. It's wrong. The president cannot deploy the army, the military, to go, for instance, to go and clean his farm, to go and settle problems, family problems, and things like that. That is the president. And as I said, he is the only one specifically vested. When you see the Chief of Army Staff act, is acting in delegated authority, and he clears it with the Commander-in-Chief. Because the responsibility, the role, is such clear-cut, it's such a clear-cut situation, and very, very pervasive. Right? Like the Boko Haram that we are facing, for instance. Like during the Civil War and things like that. People, if you want to take politics out of it, they have been using the army, in election situations. Although it's, but the president does that, right? By the argument for it is that there is a potential breakdown of law and order on a massive scale. That is justification. Other than the military doesn't come into, and the reason, one of the reasons that they are kept away, the line is distinct, is precisely because this temptation, of the military. There is a when you get them involved in all your local affairs, and then they get demystified, and then they now ask that and get into government. I mean, that.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. The see finish has entered the situation, as some might say, when you see someone finish, so to speak. But in other words, it is the over-militarization of the civic spaces that has caused, the undermining of this civic military relationship that we have. You spoke about, the carrying of the handbags, using military for electoral duties, even though they're supposed to be used for insurgency and, territorial defense. But what now can be done? What are the most critical steps that can be taken to strengthen military justice system and rebuilding the public trust between the civilians and, of course, the military?
The first thing that needs to be done, given what we just experienced, is orientation for education. From opinions all over, I can see that Nigerians are not familiar, bothered by the constitution, what is said, the constitutional role of the military. Now, I see it as a military rule syndrome. We haven't gotten out of the military rule syndrome. And that is that anticipation the military coup. From the behavior that I have just witnessed, Nigerians are likely to clap for a military takeover of government tomorrow. That is the implication of the way they are behaving. It's a license, something that is patently illegal. And then you are elevating style over substance. Somebody should have, that is okay, that's all right. But the most significant, the most important lesson we should learn from that place is where these civil-military relations. And I don't know what the one that disappointed me most was the former Chief of Defense Staff, Leo Irabo. I had him justifying and then saying that a man wearing a uniform embodies the Nigerian Constitution. That is correct. But that's in the lawful implementation of his duty. Not as an errand boy to go and occupy a land, to go and doing all sorts of... And that is the Chief of Defense Staff. So the Chief of the Defense Staff is himself confused, about what should constitute. Look, I got something from Arise this morning, talking about in all over the countries of the world, especially in Africa, what is the role of the military. Go and read it. It's such a simple, one of the most accessible information you can get. Just type it there, the role of the military in the Constitution. You will see what I'm saying. And then that it completely precludes an officer, retired or not, from using them for personal errand. Look, if that land is a military land, it belongs to the military. That's a different case altogether. But the land in question is your personal land. So look, if you want to stretch the logic, that means that man, whatever he desires he can employ the privilege that he was given, he can abuse it to go and do, and it has been going on. Look, for you to know get the idea of legality or non-legality about the use of military. Fela, when President Obasanjo was military head of state, some soldiers raided the shrine, the Fela's residence, vandalized and. But because what they have done, probably with the collusion of the president, what they have done, right, is even if you say, even a military dictator, it's illegal. So that is when they got to the court of law, they said unknown soldier. That is where that song comes from. Because what they did was extra to the role that they are supposed to play. So they cannot afford to say, oh, we did it. These people came from the C battalion. No, they said unknown soldier.
Just like the unknown gunmen.
But
then I'm just wondering, what reforms are needed to deepen democratic control of the military while respecting the institutions' autonomy and their operational mandates? Because I'm wondering, if it could have been better handled.
Yeah.
Some people have said that there was no need for all the name callings and the derogatory words that the minister used. Is that something that should also be considered?
Look, this is the weight that you assign to the intricacies of the characteristics of Wike is not comparable to the Constitution of Nigeria. When the Constitution of Nigeria is at stake, I don't endorse his personal style. If this is what it's all about, all right and good. But for us, and you keep on saying that civil military, and it's important, the civil military situation, first of course, and that's why I said I was disappointed at that former chief of. Don't they have orientation courses when they go into the military? In the orientation course that they are supposed to have, the roles, how they can do it, will be there. Then you have this agency called National Orientation Agency, right? That is precisely in his lap. Ministry of Information. School. When we were in school, I don't know whether they still do it. There's something called civics. When we were in primary, secondary, civics.
Yeah.
So these are the areas that people can get educated. But look, this is Nigeria. It's so the devil is always in the implementation. It's not that people don't know at the end of the day. But there is this idea of, it's a sad commentary on the country, because it implies a certain alienation, from the country. If you are prepared to think for somebody at the expense of your own country, which is this country, then something is wrong.
Well, we'll just have to leave it right there. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Akin Osuntokun, the DG of Labour Party, former DG of the Labour Party Presidential Campaign Council. Thank you so much for joining us.